Hi, I'm Scott Lucas of the University of Birmingham, and I'm here to talk to you about a slogan versus a plan. The UK government and coronavirus. It's been a long time since two words caused such a fuss. This week, the UK government changed stay at home, control the virus, save lives, to stay alert, control, save lives. They also changed the border of that World War II type poster from red to green. Maybe these restrictions that were in place on us, maybe they were being lifted. So what's the problem with that change? Well, a slogan is not a plan. It's just a slogan. And a slogan without a plan doesn't bring clarity, it brings confusion. We saw that not only on Sunday, but all the way through this week. As people wondered, what does stay alert mean? Does it mean that we can venture out of our homes with relatively few restrictions to work, to restaurants, to schools, to businesses? Boris Johnson gave a speech on Sunday night where he tried to continue the cheerleading. We were on the downward slope. We passed the apex of this virus, but at the same time told us, but that downward slope is still very dangerous. So while saying that we could have unlimited exercise and maybe schools could be opened on June the 1st, and maybe restaurants could be open on July the 1st, that most of the restrictions would stay in place. But still, the plan didn't come forward. Instead, the government said, well, you don't have to telework. If you can't telework, instead you can go back to your office, you can go back to your construction site, you can go back to your factory, but they didn't provide guidelines for safety. They didn't provide coronavirus secure guidelines for us or for our employers. They talked about the schools that might reopen for some primary students on June the 1st, but they issued no guidelines in terms of handling those students, making sure that they maintained distance from each other, making sure that teachers and staff, as well as children, were protected. And without that plan, unions finally said, we're not going to necessarily agree to open the schools if we don't know what's happening. Ministers contradicted each other on who we could meet and where we could meet them. Ministers were at a loss to explain what arrangements would be on transport to get to work or to possibly go elsewhere to do our exercise. In other words, we were in a jumble. And as I speak to you, we are still in a jumble about what stay alert means and indeed what this next phase of the crisis means, as the United Kingdom officially is well above 40,000 deaths, second highest death toll in the world, the highest in Europe. And the actual death toll, according to experts, is probably far higher than that. A slogan without a plan is just a slogan. Compare this to other countries who have been clear and forthright with their populations throughout this crisis. Take the case of New Zealand, for example. The highly regarded Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said at the outset of the crisis, you're going to have very, very strict measures. Stay at home, closing borders, quarantines, surveillance. New Zealand, as I speak, a population of 5 million, has had 21 deaths. And last week, it eased its lockdown, reducing its alert level from level 4 to level 3. Taiwan, 6 deaths, Iceland, 10 deaths. Similar cases that measures were put in place at the very start, which might involve surveillance, which might involve quarantines, which might involve stay-at-home measures. But the population were fully informed, and the plan was clear to almost all. Compare this with Germany, led by a scientist, Angela Merkel, where you have had very, very clear guidance from the government throughout the crisis, including over the course of the past week, as some stay-at-home provisions have been relaxed. Political advice, which has been backed up by very clear scientific guidance from the Robert Koch Institute, including explaining to Germans the key of the transmission rate, that if the transmission rate goes back above 1, then the virus can resurge exponentially, and restrictions might have to be put back in place to bring it back below 1. And probably most significant, if you're in this country, is to compare what the government in London has done with the Scottish and Welsh governments. The Scottish government under Nicola Sturgeon, the Welsh government under Mark Drakeford, have put out very clear guidelines in terms of what stay-at-home measures mean, limiting contact with others, limiting where you could go in terms of parks or outdoors areas. And they've also been very clear about the conditions under which those limitations might start to be lifted. Last Friday, in advance of the UK government's stay alert shift, Drakeford and Sturgeon put out plans for the next phase of the crisis. And that meant over the weekend that as the stay alert controversy escalated, they could actually say, well, no, we're not adopting this slogan, which in the words of Sturgeon is vague and imprecise. We have to stick with clarity on the measures that we're putting forward. They were being transparent and forthright, even as the UK government did not consult either Scotland or Wales about what it was going to do in the next phase. And indeed, the UK government did not consult the Mayor of London as it moved forth proposals for transport, putting people back to work from May 18th to May 11th, causing uncertainty and a bit of chaos on Monday. This is not to point score politically. This is not to play conservative versus labor in this country. But by Wednesday, what became very clear is that rather than getting clarity, another phase of the guidelines, well, the lack of guidelines came out when we began to get a revelation of the extent of the deaths in care homes, more than 10,000 in the United Kingdom, large proportion of them in England. And the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, asked about this in Parliament, either did not know or was deceptive about the fact that his own government, up until mid-March, had said in its guidance that coronavirus was not a serious threat to those care homes. No one in this government wants this virus to expand. No one wants more lives to be lost. But a slogan is not a plan. Messaging is not governing. Cheerleading is not informing. And in a situation which is perhaps the most serious in the United Kingdom since 1945, treating your citizens as responsible adults and making sure that you have a plan for those responsible adults, that is essential. I'm Scott Lucas from the University of Birmingham. Thank you for listening. Stay safe.